Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another fabulous episode of the Healthcare Trailblazers Podcast. Super excited to be sitting here today with Johnny Crowder. Johnny is full of energy and positivity and really fun to speak to. Johnny created a company called Cope Notes and as well as speaks a lot, does a lot of keynotes and stuff like that. And so, Johnny, thanks for joining us today.
I am pumped to virtually be here.
So let's take a step back. What is, let's go from the end backwards. Talk to us a little bit about Cope Notes, and then we'll get to the origin story.
Yeah, I'm glad we're doing it in this order because sometimes I forget to tell people what the company does. So I'm glad that we're starting there. What we do is we send randomly timed text messages that interrupt negative thought patterns and train the brain to think healthier thoughts. And all of the messages are written by peers with lived experience with mental health challenges. They are reviewed, edited, and approved by clinicians. And they could be, today you get a psychology fact, tomorrow you get a journaling prompt, the next day you get an exercise. And no two people ever get the same text at the same time. So we kind of jokingly say, this is like brain surgery without the scalpel, because in just 10 or 15 seconds per day, your brain is physically changing the way it's wired.
Fascinating. So who is this geared? Let's start with who's this geared towards?
It's going to sound pretty selfish, but I guess people like me, because I grew up not wanting to go to therapy, not wanting to take medication. And I had a bunch of great reasons why. Like, I didn't have time. I didn't have money. I didn't like being in a therapy session or being in that environment. So as I complained about all of the things that I didn't like about the options available to me, I heard a lot of people say, yeah, same here. And yeah, me too. And I was like, uh-oh, this is like a pretty big problem. So we have lots of people who use Cope Notes in conjunction with those things. They do take medication. They are in therapy. But we also have a lot of people who aren't even diagnosed with anything, aren't in treatment, and just want to take good care of their mental and emotional health the same way that you don't need a cavity to brush your teeth.
Yep. That's a good analogy. So can you give me some examples of some of these texts?
I could. I try my best not to, because part of what makes Cope Notes magic is that you never know when we will text you or what the text will say. So that novelty is really important. But let me pull up my Cope Notes thread, because yes, I use it every day.
Don't give me future, give me past, so you don't dispel the mystery.
So, and no two people ever get the same sequence. So like, I might have gotten this text on Friday, but you might not get it for a year and a half. Here's actually one that I got, that was pretty timely. I got it on Thursday, this past Thursday at 8:11 p.m. It says, if you feel like someone is ignoring your feelings, maybe they simply aren't aware of them. Not everyone is a mind reader. Sometimes being direct can pay off. That was directly related to something that I was experiencing in my life. And then I'll pick one more. I got this on Saturday, May 4th at 12:26 p.m. It says, experts believe vitamin D is a mood elevator. Good thing the sun is practically made of that stuff, right? Even 15 minutes of direct sunlight should do the trick. So some of it is like facts, like health education, and then some of it is journaling prompts where you can actually text back and respond. But the whole point is that you really never know when we'll reach out or what the text will say. And that novelty is really important.
Yeah, I love that. And then is it a two-way communication? So if I was particularly feeling down and I wanted to solicit a message, can I text back?
So yes and no. We text you once per day, no matter what, at a random time. And you can choose to text us back 1,000,000 times a day or never. And we will always show up the next day, no matter what. And we're very clear when people text us, we text them right back. The first time you journal, it'll say, hey, remember, this is your confidential journal. We don't read through your messages. We care about your privacy. Like, this is your safe space to speak freely and say whatever you want, whenever you want. But if you need to speak with someone in real time, or you would benefit from having a conversation with like a real life human, our friends at 988 would be happy to chat with you. And we have a partnership with them. So they handle all of our real-time communication.
Cool. And then I'm sure you've looked into this because there's a bunch of people in the space now, but what about some sort of middle ground where you can create kind of a super secure, good mental health AI clone version of everybody that they can kind of chat with? I know there's a lot of people in the space, and I'm sure you've looked at implementing. What are your thoughts around it?
Yeah, we thought about doing that. And actually, one of the earlier iterations of Cope Notes had some of that. And we just decided that with a peer support base, like this is one of the things that makes Cope Notes unique. Every single message is written by a real human being, like flesh and blood, lived through this firsthand. And we felt that implementing something like that, like a chatbot, would sort of undermine the whole peer support backbone of Cope Notes.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's really cool. Okay, so now that we understand what it is, so and you know what, there's one other thing that I really want to highlight, because I think this kind of gets brushed over, but the fact that it's text message and it's not social media based, and it's not, and from what I remember from looking at your site, it's literally text where you don't need to even like have a Wi-Fi connection or internet connection, which I think is really important. So first of all, why was that important? And give us some thoughts around your perspective on social media's, impact on us all as a young generation with so many mental health issues.
Yeah, the original idea was actually for Cope Notes to be, originally it was an in-person support group, and then it was a virtual support group, and then it was virtual one-on-one support, and then we thought about making it an app or like a social media-based resource. And I remember, this is like, I don't get to tell this story often, but my mom was dating this retired Navy SEAL. It's like a real tough guy. Like, I mean, he had seen some stuff. And I was telling him my idea, and he was like, listen, that's great, but let me tell you something. The people in my support group at the VA, none of us have smartphones. So you need to figure out how to get some type of digital resource into the hands of people who they're not going to download an app. That some of them live out in the sticks, so they don't have broadband internet. Some of them don't have a data plan on their phone. I was like, holy crap, man, how the heck am I going to build something that is going to support people with a brand new iPhone and people who are using like a flip phone, like a non-smart cell phone? And we found out that toll-free, like an 888 government-approved toll-free number, is actually a way for us to serve people, to deliver interventions to people who don't have internet, don't have a data plan, don't have a smartphone. And what's really cool is actually there are two statistics that blew my mind when I was considering switching Cope Notes to SMS. This was years ago. One statistic was that there are 36 million Americans who use non-smart cell phones, which absolutely melted my brain. I'm like, there's no way that 11% of the US population is using non-smart cell phones, but it's true. So in my heart, I was like, there's no way I can build something that these people can't use. But the other thing, this kind of cemented it for me. It is 50 times more likely that you will read a text message than an app notification. Our whole job is delivering interventions.
I agree with that.
So if it is 50 times more likely that an intervention will actually impact you if we chose SMS instead of an app, keep in mind, it actually does cost us more. Like it would be cheaper for us to be app-based. But when we saw that statistic, we were like, it's literally going to be more effective if we use text messages.
Yeah. So that's kind of interesting in a way, because I wonder if you're seeing, okay, so this goes back to my question about social media and its impact on us as a society. I'm curious if you see any kind of pattern around having better mental health. If you are that, what percentage did you say? 30%? Or you said 30, what did you say? That don't have
which group?
Smartphones.
Oh, the people with non-smart cell phones? Yeah. So it's 11% of the US population.
11%, which is huge. I'm curious if you've seen any patterns, if those people maybe have any positive impact on their mental health because of being on non-smartphones.
Dude, that's a good point. Obviously you've seen studies where like past a certain point, increased exposure to social media actually leads to like increased symptoms of depression, prevalence of anxiety symptoms. So like that comparison is there. I'd be interested to interview the people with non-smart cell phones, because maybe they're some of the happiest people who are like, I'm not sitting
Right.
on Instagram thinking that everybody else's life is better.
Yeah, and I mean, it's probably not a fair question to ask you because Cope Notes selects for people that do have some sort of mental health, challenge. So it's probably not fair. But yeah, I would be curious to look into that. I wonder if there's any difference. But all right, so now let's get to the origin story. Who's Johnny Crowder? Tell us about you.
I just am only now getting to know the guy. So good timing for you to ask me that. He's pretty cool. I like him. I spent the first probably quarter century of my life not really being a person. I don't know how else to describe it. I had really, really severe mental illness. I was facing multiple different kinds of abuse from multiple different angles. So I was never really healthy enough to be like a human being until my mid to late 20s. And keep in mind, like when I was younger, I mean, I couldn't drive. I couldn't make eye contact. I mean, there were so many things that were really difficult for me. So I feel like lately I'm actually getting to know myself, because for the first 20 something years, I was so in survival mode. I just wanted to I did want to die. So I don't know if you can call that survival mode, because I was actually invested in not surviving, but I was really struggling for a long time. I think a lot of people know that I went to school for psychology. A lot of people know that I have a CRPS, so I'm a certified recovery peer specialist. A lot of people know that I run a mental health company, that I do health education for work, but they don't know that it's not because I woke up one day and was like, I'm going to go help people. I was so ill for so long that I became desperate to learn about what I was going through so that I could help myself. And eventually I sort of got this contagious passion to help other people who are facing the same thing. But I wish I could say it was completely altruistic and I just like wanted to go save the world. But I think if you really dug underneath everything, like, why did I want to help people? It's probably because I knew that if there was someone else like me in the world facing what I was going through, that if I leveraged what I went through to help them, then at least it was this much pain for this much good. And then if I could help two people, then it was this much pain for this much good, and so on and so forth. So there had to be some sort of like self-serving, trying to minimize the pain that I faced by serving other people,
Yeah, that's really powerful. People often say that when you start helping people is when you really start helping yourself, and that it feels so like it's so good on so many levels. Was that kind of your experience? Did that accelerate your path towards whoever Johnny is today?
I think making my life not about myself made it easier to live. Because think about it, if I'm the main character of my own life and I'm just facing debilitating illness and like just living a life of misery, it's not a movie I want to tune into. But then if I slowly make other people, and you can do this to an unhealthy extent, speaking from experience, you can accidentally make yourself such a side character that you don't eat or sleep or take good care of yourself. There's a balance. But I think once my life became not all about me, it actually became somewhat easier to live, because before, like 100% of the people in my life movie were miserable. And then slowly I zoom out a little bit more, and I'm like, oh, okay, these people are interesting and these people are doing better. And then it just became less gloomy over time.
I really want to double click on that because it's something that fascinates me personally, that I feel like there's two sides to this conversation around young people and mental health issues. And on the one hand, you've got probably more than half the country telling kids that they're perfect and everything that they do is fine and everything, everything's great and you're the best and just everyone gets a trophy and that's the way to do this, just love and support. And then those kids, then the other half is like, what are you talking about? Those kids grow up, they become, they don't know how to push boundaries because they've never had to push boundaries in their life before. They don't know what the real world feels like. It slaps them in the face. They become these kind of incompetent humans. And so, and it's interesting because you kind of said something that's kind of in between, where when you learn that your life is not all about you is when you can start, you can start really seeing it. And to me, that resonates. Like, to me, that makes more sense. Like, I strongly think that. But I think that a lot of the mental health world is a lot more on the other side. Where, like, I saw some guy on YouTube, my YouTube feed yesterday, doing like coaching, and like he was talking to this girl and was just, "You are perfect." He looked at her and he put his hands on her shoulders and was like, "What do you need to hear right now?" And he like had to really get it out of her, and she finally blurted out that I'm enough. And he's like, "You are enough. You're absolutely enough. You need nothing more, and you're perfect." And I'm sitting there thinking, like, that's not true. If that was true of us, then we would just die, because there's nothing else to do in this world. Like, mission's over. You're where's the medium? What are your thoughts?
Dude, my therapist is really good at this balance. So I tend to have this, I think a lot of people who are ambitious, people who build things, creative people, have this general feeling of deficit, like they haven't done enough. They haven't, they'll never accomplish everything they set out to accomplish. And there's this feeling of like constantly being incomplete that I think can really destroy your life. It's like this constant search. Jim Carrey said, "I wish everybody could get rich and famous so that they could discover that that was never going to solve any of their problems anyway." And whenever I hear that, I'm like, oh yeah, bring it on. And I'll see, make me rich and famous, then I'll be the judge.
Give me the
but I know that there's truth to that. I understand that constantly looking outside of yourself to solve those problems is not always the healthiest approach. But I also know that there's something that he said to me that I think about ever since. He said, "What if you've already done everything you'll ever have to do?" And I was like, what the heck does that mean? I like immediately railed against that. I'm like, that's impossible. And he's like, just consider hypothetically that, let's say you had to accomplish 1,000,000 good deeds for other people. What if right now at 31 years old, you've met your quota? You did it. What would you do? And I was like, well, I probably wouldn't just like stop doing stuff for people. And he's like, exactly. So there's this part of you that wants to serve other people, even if the entire quota thing, even if that feeling of never having done enough disappeared, you would still want to serve other people. You'd still want to be in community. You'd still want to provide value. And he's like, that is the happy medium. It's giving out of opportunity to give and desire to give, not out of a sense of obligation.
I'd have to think about that. A little bit. But interesting thought. I don't know if we can genuinely disconnect our perception of life from, like, I don't know if we can genuinely picture that reality where you're actually done, because serving people is a currency in itself. It's not about the financial gain from building this business for you, clearly. Mm-hmm. It's not about, I think the helping people is so intertwined with your core existence that it itself is like the journey is the destination. You know what I mean? So I don't know if we can genuinely disconnect those two things. I'd have to really give it some thought, but that's an interesting thing to put your, to try to get in those shoes. That's interesting.
And I think social media is really interesting. You brought it up earlier. It's kind of like either people make themselves the main character by, it's like how many people liked my post or how did I look in this picture, or they make everybody else the main character and they make themselves invisible. Like, oh, this person has a 6-pack and this person drives a Lamborghini and like, man, I'm worthless. And it's actually, the truth is certainly somewhere in the middle where like you are part of the cast and crew of your life. It's really easy to think that you are the most important or the least important. But one of my favorite pastors, Tim Keller, says that that's pride. Either thinking that you are the most important or the least important, they're both pride. It's a version of self-importance. And it was like really difficult for me to hear that when I had such low self-esteem. I was literally depressed. I was suicidal. I was self-harming. And to hear that that's pride, I was like, how dare you? And then the older that I get, I'm like, oh, wow, it is like making yourself the most important thing.
That's so funny, because definitely not to that extreme, but I started this this podcast a couple years back and I started putting out content, and people tell me very often that oh, how do you put yourself out there? And I wish I could just put stuff out there. But, and it's exact. And what I've told them is that the reason why you're not putting things out there is because you are so egotistical. And they're like, what? Like, cause they think they're self-conscious. That's why they're not putting stuff out there. And I said, you're so egotistical. You literally think that the entire world cares about what you have to say, and everyone's going to watch you and everyone's going to critique you. I got news for you. No one cares about you. The only person that goes to bed thinking about you is you. And once you wrap your mind around that, it's like, okay, then what's the barrier of putting it out? You know?
Yeah, I always think about like the most ridiculous things I've ever seen and how 3 minutes after they happen, I went back to my regular life. Like, think about it. You're walking along the street and there's like a person in a banana costume juggling. And you're like, well, that's weird. And then you go right back to thinking about whatever you were thinking about. It's like, dude, think about anything you do is going to be less disruptive than the banana suit juggler. And yet people are going to go right back to thinking about whatever they were. And I still struggle with that, dude. I get on stage and I think, I want this to be the greatest keynote any of these people have ever seen. I want them to be talking about this keynote 40 years from now. I want them to tell their grandkids, well, that's when I got sober, was I saw that tattooed guy get up on that stage, whatever. And I have these like really lofty standards for everything I build, everything I try to accomplish. And I'm actually working now to maintain, to set goals that I think are interesting and ambitious and to really apply myself. My therapist says, you have 3 jobs in this life. You are to apply yourself fully. Mm-hmm. You are to enjoy that self-application, and you are to let go of the outcome of that self-application. Mm-hmm. So try hard to do cool stuff. Don't forget to actually remember that the stuff that you're doing is cool and to soak it up. And then completely divorce your expectation of what that self-application is supposed to accomplish. So I can do the first 2 things. I work real hard and I enjoy what I do. But then I have this third, like, lingering expectation, as if the outcome doesn't match what I expected, then I devalue the first 2. And it's the same as like, think of the biggest artist in the world as like Bad Bunny or something, or Beyonce. These are like the most streamed artists in the world. Post Malone. I don't like any of those artists, but they're the biggest. So it just goes to show that, like, is the biggest artist the best artist? Is it possible to please everybody? No. So it's really important to kind of divorce the outcome from the effort.
The effort. Yeah. Yeah. What are some tips? I don't know if you have, but something tells me you do. What are some tips for, this is something, I'm a very fast paced moving person. My brain is always moving very quickly. And, I try to make a conscious effort in moments where it's important to try to be really, really present, right? And also with phones, it's so difficult. But let's assume your phone's away, but still, your brain is consistently racing. It's always on the next step. I've kind of like come up with some internal things for myself. But what are some tips that maybe you have to really ground yourself in the present and be able to really fully, with all your faculties of reason and senses and everything, be fully present in an experience?
Can I hear yours before I share mine?
Sure. It's definitely still a work in progress, but I think the first step, which is obvious, is having some sort of reminder for yourself to even have the initial thought. So when you're in a really good experience and it's passing by too quickly, to be able to have some sort of mental trigger to stop, I think is probably number one. And then what I use is literally just like a mental snapshot. So I'll try to like really look around with my eyes and my brain and try to really, really, really just look at, it's more of a visual thing, but a visual thing that's connected to my brain, where it's like I'm looking at everything around me and I'm gonna capture this moment in my brain. But I don't feel like it's a full solution.
I love that you're asking this question, because most people who work in this field who are making huge strides are always focused on like the next thing that they're going to accomplish. Like each quarter is just, Alan Watts did this talk that I thought was fascinating, where he was like, why is it that in America where like first grade is to get to second grade, and second grade is just a means to get to third grade, and so on and so forth, until you're like, well, really going to school is just to get a job, and getting a job is just so you can get promoted, and getting promoted is just so you can have a, like, nothing is actually for itself. Everything has some sort of greater utility. And he was saying, like, if you go, imagine you went to see the ballet, and instead of them performing a ballet, they just rushed to the part of the dance floor where the dance ends because they wanted to just hurry up and get to the end of the dance. Or what if you went to see an orchestra, and instead of playing the whole concert, they just did one big cymbal crash to end the concert already, so you go to the concert so you can leave. And he was saying, like, life is actually much more like music or dance. It's an art, and the point of it is to experience it. The point of a ballet is for the whole ballet to take place, not for you to finish it. And I think a lot about that when because I get ahead of myself too. I set these big goals, and I'm always looking at like next quarter and next year, and every single press interview, people are like, and what's the next 5 years hold for Cope Notes? I'm like, man, even the questions that people ask me are future oriented. And to keep myself present, I do two things that really help me. One is I speak in very simple emotional terms, almost like elementary. I'll say, man, this is a good sandwich. And I'll take another bite, and I'm like, man, that's a good sandwich. Like basic. Or I'll say, I feel relaxed. And then like a couple minutes later, if I'm still relaxed, I'll say, I feel really relaxed. I'll say it out loud. My friends give me so much crap for it. They're like, you just said that. But it's a way for me to like check in with myself and notice that I'm feeling that way and kind of soak it up. But the other thing that I do that I'm a huge believer in is I ride my bike quite a bit, and I ride it along this area in Tampa called the Courtney Campbell Causeway. It's right along the water. And I'll ride my bike along the water, and when I look at the water from my bike, I think about how each moment that I'm looking at the water, each like millisecond, is the only millisecond in the history of the universe that anyone will ever see those water molecules from that angle. Ever. Like 1 millisecond later, my body's going to be somewhere else because I'm on a bike. And 1 millisecond later, the water molecules will be different because of wind and waves. So I've taken that to think like every time I look at the water, it's a one-of-one snapshot. No one ever again will ever be able to see the water from that perspective the way it was in that moment. And now I apply that to everything. Like each bite of the same plate of spaghetti is different. It's a different ratio of sauce, literally a different noodle. Your taste buds are maybe different. So I just am trying to treat every moment in life as a one-of-one moment and zoom in to soak it up, even if it's a moment that's uncomfortable. Like when I was getting my neck tattooed, I'm like, this is torture. And then I'm like, but it's such a unique type of torture that I will never feel again. And I'm like, ooh.
Yeah. Huh. I can actually, so the first point, that's actually, relatively similar to the visual cues that I've kind of worked up, but I think yours is next level, so I'm going to try to adopt that. But the pain thing, I actually totally agree with. When I was a teenager, I used to like try to experiment with pain, not like I would inflict pain upon myself, but when I was in pain, I would try to use that as an opportunity to like freeze and just don't let your brain freak out of like, of like these just rings of pain, but really identify what is the exact feel, like almost like dissect it and zoom into it. Like, what is that exact feeling? Is it a burning sensation? Like, what is making you do that? Like,
yes. There's good science behind that too, Mendel. Like when my brother broke his knee, I was actually right next to him, and I was asking him if the pain had a color, what would it be? And if the pain was a shape. And he was so mad at me for asking these questions. But then like a minute in, he's like, it's like a star that's bright orange, like pulsating. And then we talk so much about that he like almost came to understand the pain. And I've read about it in books. There's like really interesting science behind that. Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah. When you know something, it's a lot more manageable,
but fascinating. So I know you've had a lot of success with Cope Notes. I mean, we can continue, pontificating for forever, but I know you've had a lot of success with Cope Notes, and instead of the future, because you said that's what everyone asks you, in light of our conversation, talk to me a little bit about the present. What are some present successes, some present excitements around it?
Oh man, that's a cool question. I'm actually really pleased this week. I am working on a couple handoffs to people on my team. I want to be real transparent with you. Every founder can relate to this. You start doing stuff when you start the company, and then year after year you hire people, but you hang on to some things that you totally should have delegated. And then you're like 6.5 years into the business and you're like, oh shoot, I have people for this now. Why have I not handed these things to people? And so what I'm actually excited about right now, this sounds like such a non-answer because it's less about the business. It kind of is about the business because I've been a bottleneck. I have been hanging on to things that I've owned since day one. And what I'm really excited about right now is I'm handing, like my call right before this, I was on a call with one of my employees and I was handing him these 4 huge projects that I've been doing for like multiple years. So I'm giving him all the documents he needs. I'm email CCing him into these relationships with these really important people who are like my point people on these projects. And I'm telling him, I'm not saying you own 99% and you come to me for the 1%. I'm saying you own these 100%. I am completely delegating them to you. And I'm doing that with multiple employees in multiple parts of the business. And I think that is going to provide so much personal freedom for me to be able to do my job, but also it's going to allow us to accomplish things we couldn't before because now I'm not the bottleneck because I'm hogging these things that I used to think would be my job forever.
Yeah, that 100% is about the business. Like you said, I'm a huge proponent of that. And I think it goes back to something that I think, and you probably know this already, but going back to identification is always the first step when you're trying to accomplish anything. Something that I found was like a really impactful technique for me to identify what I should delegate. So I started flight school like 2 years ago. I also stopped flight school, but for a short period, I started flight school. And you do the whole check around the plane, the pre-flight check and everything. And one of the things that you check is the battery, right? And the battery, the thing that you check is that it's basically either recharging or discharging energy. So it's a little window, and you see if the numbers are going up or the numbers are going down. And if it's going up, you're good. It's getting energy from the engine or whatever it is. And if not, then you got to go check that out. And so I think that in all of us, every interaction that we have in every day and every task that we do throughout the day, it's a binary choice. One of two things is happening. That thing that you're doing or that person that you're talking to is a relationship thing as well. But the thing that you're doing, we'll go with the task, is either recharging your batteries or it's discharging your batteries. It's simply one of the two. And I think that that's, at least for me personally, that's been a really good way to identify what you should delegate. If you walk away from that task feeling even like slightly drained, and it's usually more than slightly, usually the tasks that drain you really drain you, then figure out how to delegate it and figure it out quick. And if you find it recharging you and you're excited and you're energized, then, double down.
Yeah, I feel like most founders in this space, specifically in behavioral health, you do this work because you were affected by it in some way. So there's this almost personal investment in everything you do where you I want to have a hand in this and I want to make sure this is up to par. And then at a certain point, you got to just be honest with yourself that actually in your effort to make everything perfect, you're actually standing in the way of things being accomplished. Right. So it's been this very, they call it, I was reading this book that called it out to pasture syndrome, where CEOs, when they hire people and they delegate effectively, then they kind of mill around and they're like, well, do you need any help with that thing? And they're like, no, I got it. And then you're like, okay, cool. Good. And then you're just kind of weird. That's a weird feeling. And I've slowly learned to actually really revel in that, to see somebody succeed with something I've handed them and know that people are going to be impacted now as a result of me not being a part of that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, Johnny. It's you have a certain calm energy about you, and first of all, congratulations with the success of Cope Notes and its continued success. But I definitely recommend anybody to find you. I know you're on LinkedIn. You can go to Cope Notes. Where else can people find you, Johnny?
Yes, I'm copenotes.com is where you can find everything you need to know about Cope Notes, or try it for free. I strongly encourage you to try it for free. Also, if you want to book me as a speaker, learn anything about me, like as a human, you can go to johnnycrowder.com. And then my main social medias, I am on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn, where I'm probably most active. And then I have an Instagram as well. My handle is @JohnnyCrowderLovesYou, because I do.
Awesome.